Skipping all preambles and introductions, I want to end this summit talking about the future of humanity. Let's put things into perspective. The universe as we know it burst into the scene 14 billion years ago. 10 billion years later, and our planet is just beginning to form. A billion years after that, and life formed on this rock. For nearly 200 million years, dinosaurs roamed the earth. For 4 million years, hominids of all shapes and sizes spread across the lands. For the last 25,000 years or so, only one hominid remained, one that evolved roughly 250,000 years ago in eastern Africa, one that turned social intelligence into a tool to change the world. That species has been through many changes, especially over the last 10,000 years as we began building empires thanks to stabilizing climate making agriculture as we know it possible. Now here we are, barely a fraction of the time as the dinosaurs have been alive, or even our ancestors, and we worry about self-annihilation, existential risk, dystopia. I wanted to talk about so many things today. My first few iterations of this talk centered around calling out the capitalists among us, who will continue to put profit above people, or the politicians who wield politics like a weapon. I want to call out the overconsumption and exploitation running rampant in our society. I wanted to show how technology has become a crutch and a hedonic drug instead of a tool for well being. I was going to point out how NFTs in the metaverse is quickly becoming just another way for the cancer of unsustainable economic growth to spread instead of any real decentralization of power. But plenty of people are talking about all of those things already, probably much better than I can. What I don't ever hear enough about is the scale and what we can be doing instead to live up to our greatest potential. The term metaverse was coined by Neil Stephenson in his novel Snow Crash. Many of us hopefully realize that it was a dystopian world in which the metaverse was created. But in that same novel, Stephenson went into a fair amount of detail about a 4,000-year-old myth of a long lost civilization known as the Sumerians. By connecting this futuristic idea to the distant past, Stephenson shows us how history repeats itself. How even a concept as new and technologically advanced as the metaverse is a concept as old as time, or at least recorded history. Many peoples over the last couple thousand years conceived of a reality that was beyond this reality, a world where our imaginations were unbounded by our physical limitations, despite those metaverses being a thing of myth and legends, of spirits and mind, even of drugs and alcohol. It was far better than what we are building today. Because what we're building today is cancer. Here's a case study. For hundreds of years, Africa had countless empires. The Benin Kingdom, whose capital city of Edo was said to be one of the most beautiful and well-planned cities in the world by the Portuguese. There was also the Mali Empire, which was home to Timbuktu, a renowned scholar city, and of the richest man in history, Mansa Musa. Now they are burned to dust and nearly forgotten, along with the Aksumite, the Swahili, the Songhai, the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, the Nubians, and so on. All of these empires died out. So much so that most people assume Africa never had much going on in the first place. They did not fall merely from being conquered, they fell due to infighting and being eaten alive by their own greed. They played their power games even when an existential threat was there at the doorstep. The same thing happened to the Greeks, the Romans, the Ming Dynasty, the Egyptians, the French, the British, and probably every other empire in history. That is the fate of authoritarians, it seems, to collapse under their own weight, enough for existential pressures to sweep them away. Meanwhile, egalitarian societies such as the Khoisan, the Mbuti, the Blackfoot, the Haudenosaunee, some Aboriginal Australians, and many more have lasted for thousands of years. Many of these people can trace their traditions back to the time of the Neanderthals or further. Unfortunately, their longevity does not look that impressive to those of us that value technological advancements. They change slowly and carefully, prudent to respect their long held traditions. Yet somehow, they're able to adapt and survive amidst all those empires which soak up the spotlight of history around them. Perhaps that's the fate of egalitarians. What I wonder is how we can get the benefits of both. And this is terribly hard for me to say, because I like to think any form of authoritarian rule is like unjust and limits our freedom. But I do recognize the growth that such societies and organizations enjoy. But growth is not everything. Too much growth is literally cancerous, like I said before. It sacrifices valuable resources to create ever more things that are not only unnecessary, but detrimental in their overabundance. How can we take the cautious, sustainable, community driven lives of egalitarian cultures that lasted for thousands of years and meld it with the quick, passionate, industrious growth spurts of empires that burn bright and hot before fading away? And how can we make sure we don't burn out all life on Earth in those growth spurts? This is where we can use the power of the metaverse for far, far more good than merely profit, power, or property. This is where we simulate a better reality. The metaverse is the most recent iteration of those first technologies ever created: tools, fire, and language. These technologies allowed us to take the power of imagination and change the world with it. The metaverse can give us the ability to level up our greatest trait as a species: sentience. Sentience is not merely the ability to think rationally or abstractly, it's the ability to simulate the world and respond proactively to those simulations. That's how we are able to think the way we do and feel the way we do and do what we do. We form countless simulations in our minds, then we tell stories, create inventions, and perform actions based on what those simulations tell us. Humans are just like every other animal, in that we respond to the environment. But the environments we respond to are not just the physical world, but these simulated worlds, the psychological, the social, the economic, and so much more. So when we craft environments where there is a monetary cost for literally every aspect of our lives, is it any wonder that people, especially those in power, care more about money than our fellow human beings? When we create environments that runs off the fumes of destruction and exploitation, is it any wonder that people hold violence as the ultimate strength? Human nature is not evil or selfish or bad in and of itself. It's very clearly social, because the evolution of our sentience was derived from the social environment of our forebears. Our greatest strength and deepest nature as a species is social skills. But if our society fosters apathy and psychopathy and narcissism, if our virtual environments discourage real conversation in favor of whatever feeds the algorithms, is it any wonder that our online environments don't feel human or rejuvenating? What if instead of building metaverses to do the same things that corrupts our physical reality and atrophies our social skills and drives us ever down the path of destruction, what if we use the metaverse to simulate better futures and actually lived in those simulations to empirically say which is better? Instead of arguing of what is realistic or not, or assuming that how we do things today is the only way to do things, what if we built virtual communities that simulate completely different ways of living and use that to determine real world policies? We need to learn from history. Did you know that many societies turned back from agriculture once they saw what it did to the land and the people who had to do more work with less returns? The people who created the first constitutions that we know of are the Native Americans, such as the Iroquois, who regularly fought against tribes that tried to build empires. They saw that those empires always led to slavery and classism and inequality. And they saw that even an empire that was successful for a period inevitably fell, and often took their surroundings with them. What if we could guide our own evolution more consciously by testing which environments to live in before we infect our minds, our bodies, and our habitats with these carcinogenic pollutants? We need to stop thinking that convenience and consumption or even ownership and capital is what defines progress and wealth. All of that is just dust in the grand scheme of things. And even in our day to day lives, that dust is not substantial enough to help us feel any sense of purpose or meaning or fulfillment. If the benefits of growth and progress can only be appreciated through the destruction of history and future of nature, if the wealth of today can only be considered wealthy by the ignorance of what was lost, what was sacrificed and stolen and abused to get what we have today, then that's not true wealth. That's not even progress. If we truly want to progress, if we want to build a world that lasts for billions of years in the future, not merely a luxurious house of cards, then we have to build for everybody, with everybody. We have to stop taking loans from the future and actually build a better future. When I say that what we do today and in the next few years may well determine the destiny of humanity and possibly even the sentient universe, that's no exaggeration, that's just fact. We can hide from the sheer scale of our choices here and now and watch our future collapse upon us. Or we can shoulder this responsibility and seek to wield this power for the benefit of not just ourselves, but of all life on earth and maybe one day across the universe. There's so much more I wish to say, so much meaning to do, but words can only go so far. If you wish to build a better world for all, come work with me. Work with groups like allmy.org, allmygroup.org. Work with Chris on things like BTMB or Gatherverse. Work with the speakers here. Work with your local mutual aid group. Stay curious, question authority, dream bigger, and be revolutionary. My name is Elijah Claude, and I want to build a better future together. Thank you.